Welcome to the Impact Multiplier CEO podcast. If you're a chief executive, or if you think like one, and you want to create exponentially greater impact, then this show is for you. My name is Richard Medcalf, founder of X Quadrant. I coach some of the most successful and impressive CEOs and executive teams on the planet and help them achieve extraordinary results. And no matter how successful you've been in the past, there's always a whole new level of impact available to you. So, if you're ready to play a bigger game than ever before, I invite you to join us and become an Impact Multiplier CEO.
Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Davina Stanley and I'm here today with Richard Medcalf again for the Impact Multiplier CEO podcast. And this is the series where Richard's come up with some fabulous questions about helping us multiply our impact. Hi Richard, how are you?
Hi Dav, I'm well, thank you. Yeah, how are you doing?
Very well, thank you. Jealous of you having had such a lovely vacation now that you're back.
Well, I'm back, and actually I've got some big news. Yesterday I actually had a business trip for the first time after COVID. So I was a very big boy. I travelled to London on the Eurostar. We're recording this in middle of September, so it probably will come out a few months later. But it was a new experience. It was like back to school. Very interesting.
Unbelievable. Well, in Australia, we are in lockdown again. So I'm allowed out of my house as of yesterday. I'm allowed to have a picnic with 4 other people if we're all vaccinated, fully vaccinated. Wow. So I'm really a long way from the Eurostar. So I'm very jealous. Not only am I jealous for you for your summer vacation when I'm in winter, but also your freedom. So hopefully it won't be too far behind us. We're getting closer. We're 80% vaccinated with our first jab for all of the adults in my state today.
Good,
so
good stuff.
Hopefully not too far.
Well,
you've got a question for us today, a really good one.
Yeah, I have. And the question for today is, what kind of leader are you growing? What kind of leader are you growing?
I think that's a fantastic question, but I'd like you to unpack it a bit so I understand it. What do you mean? What kind of leader are you growing, or leaders are you growing?
Yeah, so this speaks to the question of multiplication, right? On any journey, the first journey, I think, as a leader is that you do personal transformation, right? That we have to go up the mountain as a leader and kind of become competent and a skilled leader in our own right. But leadership is not about having followers, actually, although that's the first step, perhaps. It's really about, are you raising up other leaders? Because if you really think about leadership as it compared with management, I think management is kind of telling people what to do and organizing people. And leadership is really releasing that commitment within other people to a cause, right? A desire to go above and beyond the bare minimum in order to work on something that's, a shared endeavor together. And as part of that, you're going to need leaders. If you want to multiply your impact, if it's not going to be just you and the 8 people that you can probably manage, then you need to raise up other leaders. And as somebody once said, it's one thing to climb up the mountain yourself. It's another thing to become the Sherpa who takes other people up the mountain. It's a different skill set.
I've never heard of it described that way, but I like that a lot. Yeah.
And somebody said, you can't teach this stuff. Well, obviously, actually, you can model it. You can. It's an apprenticeship journey, and we all do it when it comes to our kids in many ways, right? We need to teach them they often learn by imitation. They learn by watching what we do, what's important to us, and also through the things we say. And so, I think this question forces us to think about our values, because the question is, what kind of leaders are you growing? Because you're probably growing a certain sort of leader, no matter what you're doing, just like you're raising a certain sort of kid, no matter what you're doing. And so when I think about what kind of leaders, for me, it's like, what are you optimizing for? What are you optimizing for? What's the priority? So there's short-term performance, people who are just driven by getting the dopamine hit of the next month's results or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Are you optimizing for behavior? So are there certain principles of acting that actually take precedence, even if that means you might suffer in the short term? Or are you, for example, optimizing for a learning culture, a learning mindset, which is again something a bit different? And so if we just perhaps pull these apart a little bit, performance versus behavior, right? Well, that's a classic dilemma that leaders face, right? It's like, do we want to just drive the result, or are we trying to build a healthy environment? And sometimes hopefully they're compatible, and often they are compatible, but sometimes there's a choice. What do you do with the leader who's high performing but low on standards, behavior, right? Not value aligned? Or what do you do with somebody who is underperforming but a great fit in terms of behaviors? So we do need to make trade-offs at certain points. Hello, it's Richard here with a quick interlude. These conversations are all about upgrading how you think about creating impact. So here's a resource to help you do just that whilst staying fast and focused. The CEO's checklist for challenging times is a quick way to enhance your thinking and detect blind spots, even when things are moving incredibly fast and you're not sure what's going to happen next. You can get this powerful checklist of 17 world-class strategies by heading to xquadrant.com/go/challenging times checklist with a hyphen between each of those three last words. Now, back to the conversation.
I suspect some of those are short-term for circumstantial, as well as the general longer-term trend as well, aren't they? Sometimes you might have a broad view on what you're optimizing for that you need to adjust for certain circumstances. When you've got a crisis, for example, you might need to adjust to that.
Yeah, that's right, of course. But again, we're kind of looking for, is it a performance mindset? Is it, but is it actually, is it what are you doing, or is it who are you being? And then was it how are you growing? And so performance versus learning is another interesting dilemma, because it's been shown that actually a high performance culture will reward again a certain behavior which is not always ready to adapt. And so often we think about performance, but if you think about performance, that means you're measuring it against a fixed set of rules. Like you have a consistent environment for performance, like you're playing a board game or a sports game, and therefore you can do high performance on the sports field because it's a finite game, right? It's a specific thing with specific rules, and therefore you can measure performance. But what happens if the rules are changing as you go? Right, then the most adaptive people are going to work, and therefore actually the experimentation that learning requires will tend to reduce short-term performance.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
But probably over the midterm, you're going to create a better outcome.
Yes.
So what kind of leaders are you growing? Sorry,
how much risk are you going to tolerate is part of that question, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, exactly. So, for example, people say I like to celebrate failure. Well, in reality, nobody really celebrates failure, right? And it's and people think I think I should, or we should do that more. Well, I would say it's not failure you want to celebrate, but it is learning that you want to celebrate. And therefore, when somebody tries something and they fail at something, they take a risk and it doesn't work out. Well, first of all, is that actually failure, or is that just part of a learning journey towards a future success? First of all, how do you see it? But secondly, you're not going to go, hooray, your project didn't work. That's not going to work, right? But on the other hand, you will say, I really love the way that you've extracted some key learnings from this, or what have we learned for next time? How are we going to change? And building that learning culture is really important. So I think if you have these, imagine a triangle, you've got performance on one end, you've got behavior in the other, and learning on the other. And this finds a kind of a map, and you can kind of say, well, where am I actually, what are the order? What's the order? Which way around am I putting this triangle? What's at the top? And how's that actually showing up in the questions that I have with my team? The conversations that we have together, what we celebrate, what we reward, all those kind of things. So what kind of leaders are you growing?
I think it's a really interesting question just to reflect on, isn't it? And perhaps to observe what's happening and think about what we'd like to be happening and see whether there's a gap between the two or whether we're comfortable that they're fairly aligned. I can imagine we might have an intention in that regard that's sometimes quite hard to actually deliver on quite precisely, or consistently perhaps.
Yeah, I think that's right. And therefore, that's why it's quite good to come up with a bit of a personal charter, or almost like articulate your leadership principles. What are a couple of those core convictions which you really believe is the path to successful leadership, to creating people who are going to make an impact? And if you kind of focus on what is that, what is that I want to pass on and multiply from what I've learned as a leader, or what the kind of leader that I want to be, and make sure that is actually coming through. Because people will, culture is built by people figuring out what works and what in the current environment. And so if you're creating the culture of your team, if people basically know that to succeed in your team, they should basically shut up, just do what they're told and deliver the results, that's the leaders you're growing. You're growing leaders who are going to do that. If people start to realize that what is appreciated and valued is a commitment to experimentation, trying things out and finding breakthrough results, for example, that will also be valued. So again, you're going to need all of these: performance, behavior, and learning. You're not going to not have any of those in your mix. But I think that's just one simple way to start to think about, what are my leadership principles? When I have to make a trade-off, where will I go? Will I sacrifice my behaviors for the performance? Will I sacrifice performance for learning? Which way around does it play? And so that would be what I would recommend as a simple call to action, is just try to draw out that triangle and just use that to think through just a few leadership principles that you would love to pass on to your team. And that's it.
I think that's really helpful, that visual of the triangle, and perhaps thinking about the orientation and the weighting for each as your base case, perhaps your ideal place to have. I think that's a really nice, helpful visual that encapsulates what you've just said there. No, that's terrific. So next time we have another question, and Richard's holding back. He's not telling me what the X means. He's got a quirky title for this one. It is WWXD. So I'm looking forward to hearing what Richard means from that. As usual, he's holding it back from me. So I look forward to drawing it out from him when we get together for our next session. So if you'd like to go and see other podcasts in the series, you can go to xquadrant.com/podcast. So unless Richard's got anything else to add there,
I've got one last thing, which is really just a reflection on this episode. This question is not a question that you need to ask if you just want to drive performance in the current quarter. This question is really a question about legacy, and it's a question about multiplying your impact, and it's a question of scaling, right? These questions to multiply your impact. And so if you're serious about multiplying your impact, this is really a key question. It's, who are you raising up around you?
That's terrific. I can absolutely see that playing out. So thanks so much, and we look forward to seeing you again next time with Richard's WWXD question that has me so curious. Bye for now.
Speak soon. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Now let's talk about you. When you're in top leadership, when you're in the biggest role of your career, who supports you at a deep level as you lead others? Who helps you multiply your impact and get to the next level? If you're ready to learn more about our content, our coaching, and our community, then visit us at xquadrant.com.